Welcome to the Social Your Sales podcast. Social has changed the B2B and professional services sales landscape forever. We are here to help you navigate what you need to know and how to execute these new strategies. Whether you are a sales leader, individual producer, or a member of the C-suite looking for answers, this is the podcast for you. Now here are your hosts, Brandon and Eric.
Hey everybody, this is Eric Holder with Social Your Sales podcast with Brandon Lee over here. Stop laughing at me, Brandon. We've got a great session coming up with you here with a gentleman named Michael Phelan. Phelan, not Phelan. He's not Phelan, he's feeling good, with Go-to-Market Pros. And he's got some really interesting things that he brings up regarding new ways, or not necessarily new, but bringing together a multitude of ways to make contact with people and build relationships with people. And certainly part of that is in the social selling sphere. But we actually end up talking about a lot of other topics around that overall sales relationship building side. What's the thing that you took away from
that? Yeah, so it made me, I kept thinking when he was talking of nothing has changed, it's just different. Mm-hmm. And some of the tactics and these go-to-market strategies that he talked about, you look at it and go, we can apply that into digital. Like, we talked about direct mail. Right. And there's some tactics that we used in direct mail instead of just a big sweeping, direct mail is dead.
Right.
What are some areas, some things you can take from direct mail that worked and apply it into social?
And by the way, I think in other episodes in the future, we'll talk about omni-channel marketing and multi-channel marketing and how that comes into the social selling sphere as well.
What was your big takeaway from that conversation?
Really, I think that it probably is around his concept of moderated marketing and the approach, which I've seen it before, and I'm not going to spill the beans on what it is. I've seen it used before, but I've always thought, gee, this must be a company that's spending a lot of money on research and development and all sorts of other things, and you don't really realize that there's a service like Michael's that can actually help you execute on this moderated marketing.
And the perception from the customer is what you just said. It takes a lot of money.
Right.
So all of a sudden, and we do know perception's everything. So
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so join us and listen up. Here we go with Michael Phelan from Go-to-Market Pros.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Social Your Sales podcast. I'm Brandon Lee, and of course, here with me is the smarter half, Eric Holdo.
That's not true at all, but hello. Nice to be with you.
I like to keep you on your toes. Hey, we have a great guest with us today, Michael Phelan, who is the founder of Go-to-Market Pros. And Michael and I met through social media.
Really? No, that doesn't work.
And we met, and then within a short period of time, we had a Zoom meeting scheduled, and we had a great conversation a few days ago. And here he is as a guest, at least from the date that we are recording. He's a guest here today. Michael, welcome.
Well, thank you, Brandon and Eric, for having me on. This is definitely a topic that's been a passionate one of mine, everything around social selling. So looking forward to the conversation. I'm based in Boston, and I'm very focused on helping companies come to market in new and innovative ways. So I love everything about social marketing and social selling.
Yeah. With your background in helping companies go to market, obviously with the name of your brand, and that's what you've been doing for a while, how did you get involved with social, or when did you get exposed and start adopting social as a channel to do that?
Yeah, so I've always been a big proponent of LinkedIn going back many years, and I always connected to as many people as possible. So for example, every webinar that I would attend, every industry conference that I would attend, I would invite all of the speakers and the moderators, and I'd say, hey, thank you, it was a great session. I enjoyed this particular comment you made, or this particular, and I do some work in the space. So I would kind of start to collect all the experts, the thought leaders, the innovators, the companies doing interesting things, obviously my customers as well as prospects. And then I started to figure out, if I could curate content for them, and I could be a valuable person in their network, over time, if I reached out to them and asked for help or an introduction or some feedback, that they would be responsive to that. And it's really a give to get kind of network. And when used well, you can build up some equity and some relationships. And, people are happy to help you on the other side as well.
Yeah.
I love that expression, give to
yeah,
get.
I was just going there. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So what you're doing is essentially at the root of what we talked about with social selling. I mean, it's providing value, building your personal brand in a way, and being somebody that people would naturally come to potentially. And then when you do make that outreach, you're not a stranger. You're not just asking for something, whether it be a contact or anything else.
Totally. Because people don't want to be sold to. These days in social selling, I often say that you earn the right to pitch. You start offering some value, maybe you share some research, you share some best practices, you start offering some value, and then people have a discussion and they kind of say, well, this is really interesting. Tell me a little bit about your company. That's the ideal thing, is where they nearly call you into something that's closer to describing what you do and how you might help them, but nearly kind of, be invited in, as distinct from pushing yourself into their world. Be invited into their world, is a very good way of doing it.
Yeah, we refer to that as creating the pipeline of people that are ready to buy from you versus a pipeline people that you're going to keep trying to sell to. So that buy from versus sell to is, well, number one, it's a huge difference in your close rate. All the data will suggest that, but it's also a big difference in your average deal size. And a lot of that comes from the relationship building. It always has. It's just now it's happening in this, thing here in front of us called a computer and social media.
Yeah, and I often say that, people say, well, sales and marketing is incredibly complex and social selling is incredibly complex. And, they struggle with that a little bit. But I often think leadership is about making things simple and not making things complex. But if you think about social selling, if you come about it with the goal of helping your buyer or helping your customer or helping your prospect be a better buyer, be a better customer. If you come at it from that perspective, I was recently doing some work on customer success, and it's interesting, people in customer success may be servicing one particular retailer. Like, let's say you're servicing Target, and Target are going to say, well, what other retailers are you working with? And you go, none. And Target go, oh, wow, so you're not going to bring a lot of insights to me in the industry. But even if you were working with none, if you're able to say, hey, I've been closely following these retailers and actually had some interesting conversations with them, even though they're not my customers, but I've learned the following, and this might be kind of relevant to you. So I think that companies need to think that all the learning doesn't happen just in their building, and buyers and customers are much more interested in what's happening in their competitive set than they are with your case studies, right? So think about helping the buyer, in a broader sense. And of course, if you do that, you build your own brand. And say you go to another company, or say you're working on another product launch, you're building up some equity. The other thing you could do, which is interesting, is kind of amplify your prospects or your customers' posts. First off, recognizing, hey, this is a great post, adding some value to it, sharing it with other networks, maybe even sharing it with their entire company, because you can tag their company. maybe if it's not competitive, you share it with their competitors. But what you're doing is you're kind of taking, someone who's maybe posting to a couple of hundred people and now exposing them to 10, 20, 30,000, and helping their brand accelerate. But at the same time, you're making a connection and adding value to their thought leadership. So kind of one of the ways that you can be giving and helpful is by amplifying, your customers and prospects' voice and building their equity as well on LinkedIn platforms.
And I want to mention that my partner over here, Brandon, he actually brought this idea to my attention not long ago, which I think was just brilliant. Was to, when we're reaching out to some of these people, we make that connection. We say, hey, I've got a pretty good sized platform. Is there anything I can help you with? Is there any content that you'd like me to share with my audience that could help you? And rather than a quid pro quo involved in there of any sort, just be look, how can I help you get your message out to a broader audience?
Yeah, and I do a lot of work on what I call net new prospect meeting programs, and what they're designed to do is to drive engagement. And engagement could be a chat, it could be a phone call, it could be a Zoom. Brandon was talking about just kind of a post on social media that led to several other things. But how can you, as a marketer, drive something that drives engagement? Because engagement means you've connected with them either on a personal level or on a business level, and you've got them to engage in a conversation. That kind of allows you to come back to them and add more value. Maybe you want to connect with them, maybe you want to send them a research report. But I think marketers in general think about kind of, we send something out, you downloaded, you're an MQL. The next thing we're trying to get a meeting, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no relationship there. One program that I find is interesting, and it's along this give to get, and there's several different ways that you can execute it. But one company in Boston called Rapid7, they're in this IT security business. Very fast growth business, but hyper competitive. So it's all about making a connection. But one of the things they do every Veterans Day, and I was just at an organization called Operation Stand Down today, and they help kind of people who are coming out of the military readjust to life and so forth. So this is very topical for me. But they reach out to all the veterans, and some of the company executives are former veterans. So they reach out to their customers and prospects, and they say, well, thank you for your service. By the way, we've got some executives who are also veterans, and we'd like to donate, some money to your veterans charity of choice. And first off, the veterans all respond. They're delighted. There's a conversation that happens about that. But you've given, right? You've recognized their service. There's an emotional connection to that. You've given to their charity. That's also, and you haven't asked for anything. But invariably, the chat happens. Well, tell me a little bit about what your company's doing. Tell me a little bit about, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it can lead to a demo. It can lead to oftentimes an introduction. And it's called give to get. And so make it personal. Like a lot of companies give away millions of dollars, right, to some United Way when the guy's flying around in a giant plane and making $10-20 million a year, right? Wouldn't it be much better to give to an operation like the one I mentioned called Operation Stand Down, where it's the real people in the market helping them with housing and so on and so forth, and have the reps be the one who could give. Mm-hmm. And you may not get a lead on every call, but it gives them something to make a connection. Reps love to have conversations. They love to meet people. It's the energy that keeps them going, right? It's the honey that keeps the hive going. So anything you can do to drive interaction. So that's one of these net new prospect meetings, and it's all executed through LinkedIn, and it drives a lot of new connections. It drives a lot of new information, and when you give first, there's another one we did at CES where we gave $250 to a charity of choice if you'd come and see our new product. And people will love to get feedback on a new product. The difference being is If you say, hey, we got a demo, you feel like you're being sold.
Right.
If you say, hey, we'd love your feedback on what you think about this new product that we're looking to bring to market. And as a thank you for that, half an hour of your time, we'll give $250 to charity of choice. And the room was packed out in the hotel. It was very successful. They got to meet a lot of top customers, top prospects, people who they wouldn't have met with before. And so another flavor of give to get. And there's lots of them, giving people research, giving people access to an analyst. Sometimes it's giving people access to your CEO or your tech guru. So a lot of times companies have these, assets, capability, people, content that's of high value. And, if you kind of offer it, hey, we love your feedback in return for that, we're happy to give you this something exclusive, something special. So setting up some form of give to get, setting up some form of back and forth can be very powerful.
And the thing that so many people, and I get these LinkedIn requests for connection all the time. Somebody connects with me, and then immediately they come in and say, yeah, I'd really like to talk to you, about what you do. So they start out maybe okay, but then they're like,
you get that. You don't get straight to the.
Oh no,
give me 30 minutes.
These are the good ones. No, I'm saying these are the good ones. Then they get to the point of, can we set up a time? And here's my Calendly link.
Right,
can we set up a time for you to? And I'm like, do you not realize that time is my most valuable possession? The most valuable thing I can give you is my time.
Yeah.
I'll give you a free demo of our software, but half an hour, which is what, by the way, I appreciate your time today. But that time is an extremely valuable resource. And when you look at the level of people that you're normally trying to connect to, just do the math. All right, as a sales rep, do the math on here's what this person probably makes. Here's how many hours they work, assuming they're working 40-hour work weeks. Figure out the hourly that you're asking them to devote to your fishing expedition.
Yeah, with a cold outreach.
Right.
From somebody they don't know.
Exactly.
And you're asking for 30 minutes of their time that would probably equate to X amount of dollars.
Social Your Sales. We'll be right back.
Is your sales team struggling to hit quota? Are your buyers ignoring your sales requests for conversations? The third tier of digital transformation is social. Is your team equipped to meet this challenge? This show is brought to you by FunnelAmplified. We help sales teams align their sales process with how modern buyers prefer to make their purchase decisions. FunnelAmplified is a social selling platform that drives new opportunities with your sales team, using proven social selling tactics to drive pipelines and hit quotas. With FunnelAmplified, it's quota achieved. To learn more about FunnelAmplified or start a free trial, please visit us at FunnelAmplified.com.
Now, I will say, Michael, it was interesting when I was reading your points regarding your program, and I'm sorry, I forget the name of it. It's
Net new meeting program.
Net new meeting program. So it's funny because one of those items, I was sort of laughing when I read it because it was so familiar. When COVID hit, I was with a manufacturer, Konica Minolta, that I think you actually are connected with, Kay Dufernandez, who's the CMO over there. Yeah. And we created a mailer that we printed the box, because that's what we were selling was the box printing. And we included in this box a martini glass and the shaker and everything you needed to make the martini. And we give them an invite and asked for a certain time at a certain time, this Zoom session, will you please join us in having a cocktail and we can get to know each other a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Sent out 4 of them. 4 of them all responded, of course, and we created those drinks. And I mean, they built relationships at that point. So it absolutely works. And by the way, there's a huge social aspect to what we're talking about here. I call social selling the digital cocktail party. because it is essentially what you're trying to do. You're having a cocktail party in a digital form, because you don't walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, this is me. Buy from me. This is my product." No, of course, you get to know them. You provide content, context, stories. You interact with them, understand what their needs are, who they are. You may never get to talk about you, right? But you're learning about them. So in this digital cocktail party, it seemed only appropriate to have a digital cocktail hour, which was sort of and when I saw it on your list, I'm like, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. I mean, the rest of the stuff is good too, but
yeah, that has kind of really bloomed. Traditionally you go to places like Europe and Japan and so forth, and you have to have a relationship before you sell, right?
Yes.
It would be very insulting to start selling somebody in the first minute you engage with them, right? You have to be very deferential. You have to learn to, so after the relationship is established, the selling. So the States has always been moved to the sale quicker. And I think for some reason, COVID has really highlighted the importance of relationship more than ever. And maybe it's because people are at home and things like that. But these kind of what I call experiences, it could be a cheese experience, could be a chocolate. I saw someone doing a chocolate tasting one. The wine ones can sometimes be like you bring in a wine expert and there's 3 or 4 different wines and they talk about this, and people have really loved that. There's various forms of food that will arrive, but something that can be a curated experience where the product comes and there's a special time. Even more important, if there's somebody describing maybe how that cheese is made, or describing, you see a video from the person at the wine, at the wine producer, whatever it may be. And slowly but surely it ends up softly rolling into some business, but it's not heavily pushed. And it's all about making that connection. But if you give people experiences that are socially centered, that are interesting, that are 2-dimensional, that work well over Zoom, that's much better than the sending them the box. So it's funny that you said about sending them the boxes. I was talking to a CIO, and he got this box from this company, and it was during a snowstorm. It was in Boston, and this is a big retailer. So they sent this box, and his admin was out. So he goes out in the snowstorm, and he has to march down 4 buildings because the guy in the delivery room won't bring it to him. He says, if your admin's not here, you better go get it because I'm not bringing it down, right? So he goes down, he gets the box, he brings it back, he opens it up in his office, and all of a sudden confetti start, just explode, right? And in there is a ball, in there is a spring, and some other piece of plastic and some cheap candy, right? And this has cost, a lot of money to deliver to this guy, right? So in walks the CEO, and he's got candy and confetti, and the CEO says, I'm glad you're having a party on the company's dime, and walks out.
Oh my goodness.
He's on the floor picking up all this crap, and he said, I will never do business with that company again. Well, you see the kind of stupidity of the gift. Is kind of trash and trinkets, and and that's not really going to engage a CIO. No. But so you have to be more prospect centric. The other thing I do a lot is what's called moderated meetings, and this is a very interesting one because there's so many salespeople now, and of course with inside sales, there's hundreds of thousands of salespeople, right? In the retail world, for example, there's 100 retailers of any significance, and I would say there's 20,000 reps trying to sell to those 100. So you really have to be smart about how you reach out. So what I've found typically is the retailers are ignoring like 95% of sales reach out, even if it's good. So what I found is if I reach out on behalf of my client and do a best practice study, so I'm doing a best practice study on advanced marketing personalization, I'll pay you for your time or donate the money to charity, and you'll get to see the research report before anyone else. And when I bring him in on the call, then I introduce my client as the sponsor of the study, and then I interview them for 15 minutes. What are you doing now? What's your process? What are you trying to solve for? Who's best in class? What works? What doesn't? We get all that discovery information. And then on the back half of the call, my client gets to offer, hey, I'm glad you said that because we just ran into that problem. This is how we dealt with it. And it makes the reps so much better when they have to listen to a professionally moderated discussion they get smarter, they get more value added, they're more strategic, builds a relationship, and then we package up all the findings and bring it into content marketing. So it's a different approach. It's approaching them as an analyst or as a researcher, and genuinely doing the best practices study, but making the salespeople be value-added sponsors who can contribute insights on solving the problem. And sometimes they say, I'd like to see a demo right on the call.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, hey, we have something going on. I'm happy to introduce you to the buying team, and sometimes not. But these are conversations that they never would have. And it starts on LinkedIn, and the reach out starts on LinkedIn, and it ends up being on phone or Zoom. And then it goes back to LinkedIn and back to social media as all the content gets published. So kind of different ways of coming at value and different ways of approaching buyers, so that the sellers become more strategic and value added. Does that make sense?
Really interesting. Yeah. And I really like that moderated aspect of this. And I will tell you, it's funny because the people that I respond to are those that tell me, I'd like to understand more about what you're facing, what your needs are. And typically there is some sort of an offer of compensation, not to me personally, no ethical breach, but whether it's donation or something like that, in order to get the time. And that, to me, it makes sense. It makes me feel, one of the things I've always enjoyed doing in my career is talking to R&D and helping companies understand better how to not only to build a better product, but how to market it better and how to understand the market better. And it's funny because if you tap into those primal things that people think about, that motivates them, that makes them happy to do their job, if you can find those things, I think one of those many times is, I like to share my wins. I like to share my successes. I like to share how we solved problems. And, as long as I'm not necessarily telling my competitor how to go do it or something like that.
Right.
And even sometimes then, because, it really works that primal instinct or desire we have to be able to tout our accomplishments.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I was talking to a rep the other day, and she was a new rep, and she was 4 weeks into the job, and she's like, none of these guys are going to talk to me. She goes, I don't know anything about this business. I barely even understand how the product works. And I said, I get that, but why don't you reach out to some people, in your territory and say, hey, I'm brand new to the business. I just started my career in XYZ. Would love to hear a little bit, 5 minutes. Just tell me a little bit of how this industry works, and why people are successful, and so forth and so on. So she did, and she got several meetings with people, and it ended up being a half an hour. And they were really helping her kind of understand the dynamics of the business. But, also they were kind of like, hey, what exactly does your company do? And she was kind of fine tuning her pitch and so on and so forth. But she became more confident. But this kind of innate kind of thing about, there are people out there who want to be mentors and want to help. And if you reach out to them, you recognize their experience, don't approach them to sell, but just say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? The other thing I think is interesting is what I call time shifting. I had a call with Walmart one time at 8:00 on Saturday night. And my wife said to me, what the hell are you doing? You just working all the time and so forth. And I'm like, but it's Walmart. And, and it turns out it was a great call. Don't really know why he scheduled a call, other than that was the only time that maybe he didn't have booked or whatever. But, if you say to people, hey, maybe I can, catch you on your commute to work, or maybe I can catch you at lunchtime, or, maybe Friday evening I'll send you a bottle of wine and we'll chat from 5:30 to, shift the time, shift the context, because people are so busy during their regular day. And ironically, with COVID, people are less busy because there's not as many fire drills, there's not as many meetings. There's more meetings if you're in the office than if you're not, right? So in theory, you'd say it's easier to get meetings with prospects during COVID. However, I actually think, ironically, it's harder because they're now they've got the home piece, kind of built in. So there's no distinguishment between their work and their home. And if they have a spouse, and if they have a dog, and if they have kids, and they're, living in an apartment or whatever it is, it's really difficult to have quality work done.
You know what,
so
though,
they
where
be more selective.
Yeah, you know where, though, I think that with COVID and how much time people have, I think it's been the tactics that people have used to try and get their time that hasn't made it successful. And what I mean by that is sending a message to somebody that says, you got 30 minutes for anything without a relationship is not going to be successful. So I love all of these net new prospect meeting concepts you're talking about. It would empower a team to be able to have something to message to people in social media that's not, do you got 30 minutes for a demo? It's, you might be asking for 30 minutes, but you're coming about it a different way. I love your example of the younger employee going, I don't know anything about this industry. I barely understand the product. I'm 4 weeks into it. Hey, when you go out and start asking older people or more experienced people in the industry for help, you're going to find a lot of people that are willing to do it because we're social beings, right? And some people are going to tell you, no, I don't have time for it. But you're going to find a few, and that is relationship development material right there.
And I think that, part of this is about differentiation. Differentiating your approach from everybody else's approach. Differentiating the message itself being radically different than the messaging that they're normally getting from people who are just trying to sell them something. And I think back in the print industry, back in the 90s, there was a little company called Bed Bath & Beyond. And they started mailing out, everyone got their direct mail, and you'd get 3x5 postcards, and you'd get letters and whatnot.
20% off.
And they started mailing out 20% off coupon that was 6 inches by 11 inches. This format had never been used before. They were the first ones to use that postcard size. And it jumped out at you in the mail. And in big letters, what did it say? It said 20%. Now, granted, we're not talking about those kind of sales tactics, but for its time,
there you go.
It was a revolutionary way of differentiating themselves, of getting some interesting exposure to, normally we had 3,500, at that time, 3,500 marketing messages a day that we would see. Today, it's closer to about 12,000 a day. But so how do you differentiate yourself in that morass of messaging? And it jumped out. It's, this isn't, again, it's not the same because we're talking about actually radically different type of technique, but it is the same in that it's how do I get myself noticed the right way, at the right time, with the right channels, with the right people.
Yeah.
And that's the basis of the digital cocktail party.
It's all done.
I'm going to keep using that.
We just solved it. We just solved it. And it is. I mean, we've talked about gestalt thinking.
Yeah.
If we, our nerdy side.
That's
we
pretty
talked
nerdy.
about-
Gestalt,
that's right.
huh?
Gestalt thinking. But it is. If you've got 16 things that all look alike, you get lumped up in one thing, and nobody's unique. But you got 15 things that are all the same, and one thing that's different. That's the one that you remember. Right?
Yeah, I remember one we did at Student Advantage, and Student Advantage was a college marketing. We had about 6 million students. We dealt with internet sites, e-commerce, spring breaks, concerts, all that kind of stuff. But there were like some really big corporations. General Motors was one of our clients, but there were very other big auto clients that really were not that tuned into what was going on in the college market. So one of the things that we did is we developed a direct mail, and actually when you open it up, it was like a nipple ring, and it said to the CEO, went to the CEO, and it says, do you know what this is? And of course, they're going to open it up, and they're going to say, 7.5% of college students wear this. This is why it's worn, and so forth and so on. If you don't know what it is, you probably don't know a lot about your college students. And by the way, they're your next generation of students to keep your company viable in the future.
That's really good.
And, but we really got that. It's funny on direct mail. It's interesting because direct mail was starting to really, prior to COVID, was becoming highly successful.
It was.
As a way of reaching people.
Response rates up to 9 or 10%. according to-
direct mail was up and things like that. But what's actually happening now is the direct mail is not reaching them. So it's gone down, not because they wouldn't notice it, but just because it's going to their offices and they're not in their offices.
Right.
And so a lot of stuff is just sitting there in these buildings that are kind of empty. That may change over time, but it just shows you have to be very tuned into, what's happening in the market. And the other thing, which is kind of another interesting thing, is, people are always interested in the future. They're always interested in analysts. So I do see some companies that do a really good, work with a company called Chaos Search, and they're in deep log analytics and streamlining that process and things like that. But the CEO regularly interviews, all the top analysts, and talk about what they're doing. The analysts talk about what they're seeing in the market and things like that. But if you're able to have that kind of joint credibility and bring value, because the analyst is talking about the market overall, which the buyer wants to know, is this a technology that's going to take off, and is it foundational, and is it going to grow? And they also want to know, is your technology unique? But the combination of providing you with an expert, and that could be a book author, that could be someone in an association, that could be you with a customer, and so forth, is very powerful. So can you connect yourself with entities that have credibility and broader reach, and can you share kind of
You
back
mean
and forth?
things like bring on really interesting people as guests on podcasts and
There you
stuff
go.
like that, and get yourself associated with them. I couldn't imagine doing those types of tactics. What I really love about this is we actually went through a little bit of history of things that worked at the time in direct mail. We brought it back to the present with. And I did about 2 months ago. I had Wagyu beef hot dogs overnighted to me, and I joined an online little cocktail party, and there was someone there cooking and introducing me to a butcher shop that's Buckhead Butcher Shop here in Atlanta. And now I go down there,
Yeah.
right? And it came through one of our. He's actually a customer now, but we're talking about these different ways of building relationships with people, and it may not be overnighting hot dogs to somebody, but it's definitely messaging and talking and engaging with people in a different way other than you got 30 minutes for a demo.
There you go.
So, Michael, thank you so much. We ran out of time. This was a great conversation. And Michael, tell our audience how they could find you.
Yeah, so I'm at Go-To Market Pros. It's just try that again. Go-To Market Pros, G-O-T-O Market, M-A-R-K-E-T, pros.com, or just Michael at gotomarketpros.com.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much for being with us. We'll have you back sometime. That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me on.
All right, everybody. There we are. Michael Phelan. Feeling, not
That's right,
failing.
not failing.
We're going to remember that.
He's feeling good, not
He's
failing miserably.
That's right. That's right. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Social Your Sales Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Social Your Sales Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends. Social is meant to be social, and sharing is a great way for us to meet you and get to know you. Click on share and tag us at FunnelAmplified, or just use #SocialYourSales.